Okay. Hi and Merry Christmas. Yay. So I'm just at my crib chilling, but I decided to come and film a little bit, and I was watching some things on YouTube about like comparing living in a relatively rural area to like living in like a metropolis type, like really busy big city, kind of like where I'm living now, like rural. Um, where I was living, the city before now, wasn't very metropolis ish, but this and other things made me want to talk about why I moved to Los Angeles. Um, Growing up, I listened to an extreme amount of gangsta rap in general, but West Coast rap was called, I guess that era of rap could be categorized as gangster rap. Um, Now you have mumble rap, I think, and I think that even started as like a pseudo insult, but then the genre just became that because that's kind of what it is, and that's like what's happening now. So, and then before that, like a couple waves of rap before that maybe was like trap music. Um, I think that might have originated. I forget, but I know about the trap. You don't want to get caught in the trap, but trap music usually is made in the trap. But I digress. So I listened to a lot of gangster rap growing up. So this included like Snoop Dogg. Well, it included Death Row records, like a lot of Death Row. Um, Tupac was in there, kind of, but I was more of a Bone Thugs and Harmony fan, and um, they that their biggest album was produced by Eazy-E. Eazy-E was with Death Row, and Death Row with Eazy-E, and was started with like Dr. Dre, Ice Cube, and some other cats, but um, that's pretty much like my first taste of the West Coast. And then I was listening to like West Side Connection. Man, that was a good album, man. Like there was one, I forget what it was called, but it was a good album. But anyway, I digress. This was a huge part of my musical life as a young child. So I was thinking like they do some crazy shit on the West Coast, and then I see stuff about like lowriders and hydraulics, and we all know that I've loved cars since before I even got my license, and I got my license when I was 16. So go back to like, my thoughts about the West Coast. It was just like it's so different, and I wonder how it is. And, you got gangsters by the beach. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't mix, right? Like, yeah, this place where like tourists go, but then these hardcore people are like, near it just seemed all over the place, So then growing up, I had an aunt and like my mom's cousin really, and I always saw pictures of her and pictures of her kids, which would be my cousins. And one, I guess one day my sister and I just decided to take like a random trip to like Los Angeles to visit them. It was like in 2003, the year that I graduated from university. And university, I'm talking like some European uni. When I graduated from college, it's weird because if you say college now, it sounds like you went to like a community college, and I spent way too much. I guess community college is expensive nowadays too, but my student loans grant me the access to say university. Plus I did go to a university, so, but I graduated from college. Like old school terms is like, I guess college. I don't know. I digress. So, we decided to go out there to visit after I graduated. And, I maxed out credit cards. Like, this was back in the day before they had laws giving credit cards to like college freshmen. Like, I was out of school by this time, but let's just say I had credit cards that had like pretty big balances. And so like I had one that had like $2,000 balance, and I was like, shoot man, let's go to California. So yeah, like, hey. So we go out there and we wind up like staying with my aunt. Well, rewind that. We wind up renting a car, right? And we're supposed to just get some plain car, low budget, bare minimum, just trying to scoot around town and be cool, economy. But then they wound up upgrading us to like a cherry red convertible new Mustang. And it was just like, what? We just came off of the plane from the East Coast, and now we're about to be in Los Angeles in a red convertible. Like, doesn't even make any sense. It was cool, like, very cool. So rewind a little bit further back. I remember having a layover in Arizona, and I remember getting off of the plane and feeling dry heat for the first time. I had never experienced dry weather, period. And you can see my hair is kind of curly now, but the thing is I have a lot of weight on my hair, so it just gets pulled down. And when it's first like washed and then it dries, it'll be a lot curlier. This is after being in a bun, and just tied up, so it kind of gets straighter. Long story short, I've been fighting like humidity, because when my hair was curly, like middle of my back, or maybe longer, especially if I pulled it straight, it'd be like longer, but it would be like corkscrews. But the fight of my hair was always humidity. And so like dry heat, I would later find out I had no fuzz in my hair, no frizz, when I lived in California. So, or I found that out the 2 weeks that we stayed there for the very first visit. And I also was born to be prone to eczema. So as a baby I had it, in the wet spots, like the folds of my arms and the folds of my knees. So, with humidity, like those little areas, they just get hot and clammy, and eczema can come. I later find out, it's really a spin-off from like me having a gluten allergy. When I eat bread, I see that it pops out now, but I didn't really find out until late 30s, very late 30s. So rewind back to Los Angeles. So then we meet our aunt. My sister and I meet our aunt, and she's like very like flashy, like alive and like vibrant. She's like living in Los Angeles, near the beach, in a real cool, like trendy-ish part of town. Not overly trendy, but it was cool, and she had like a really cute bob, and it was like bone straight, and like platinum blonde, and she like wore like red pants, like, and a white shirt, like to go out to the club with us. And that was just cool to me. It's like I just admire that kind of person, because I think sometimes I have an appreciation for people who just are alive after like 30. You know what I'm saying? Like I've seen people who just start referring to themselves as being old when they're like 30 and above, and I'm just kind of like, dude, I can't even, like, no. So I really appreciated this person who had kids that were my age, like outdoing me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. I'm not saying like outdoing, like, but just still young and beautiful at heart, and on the outside, keeping up with herself. I don't want to refer to people who are like older than me as like being older. It's just, anyway, she was real cool. So, my bad. So then I meet my cousins, and my cousins were cool, especially like one, and it was like just a lot of wild stuff. It's like I did get sick the first few days I was in Los Angeles, because the thing about it is that the pollution is real, and if you're not living there, you'll feel like you have like a cold for a few days, and it's like pollution sickness. And I was like, what is this? And it's like pollution is foggy out there. So that's not a cool part of Los Angeles at all. Another part is like the dry heat is cool, but the sun there is strong, and it'll beat the hell out of your face. It's like you'll wind up having leather face before you know it. And my skin looks way better now. Maybe because I also have more fat underneath my skin now. But ultimately, my skin quality now is like way better. It's like night and day. So, but back to the trip. So I had my credit card. I got $2,000. Like just a completely zero balance credit card, and got a red Mustang. And I remember like we went to go down to Compton, and my sister was into filming at the time, and I think this was the time that we were there the first time that she brought her friend with us, and she was real cool. But I remember just filming, and maybe it was the second time that we went. I can't remember. We went twice, and then after the second time, like one year, the first year we went, and then from there we decided we need to go here every year until we move here. So then we went the following year. I can't remember which one it was. Maybe it was the second time. I can't remember. But basically, my sister was filming a lot. My sister and I, like my sister always, I grew up with my sister always filming me, because I was the only other subject in the house, like that could, like, that would like be okay. So that's why I grew up taking like a lot of pictures and a lot of film and being like okay with it. Because back in like the 80s and 90s, my sister, one of her first things was having a camera. So she was filming around Los Angeles, and we're filming like a documentary of it. So we went down to Compton, and there was this dude walking down the street drinking a 40 out of a paper bag. I'm not even making this up, man. Like, there was so much stuff that happened just in the first trip ever out there. It was just madness. Like, not madness, like, it was extreme, like, it turns out he was, I think, a stripper. He took us to his grandma's house. Now, some girls going over to this house with a guy that we don't know, come on, like, that's just stupid. But it turned out to be cool. It was like our first time seeing a Los Angeles house, like 1-story flat roof, and it turns out that the grandma used to babysit Eazy-E. And this lady, I don't think she was lying. I think she was telling the truth, because she was probably in her 70s, and she used to talk about how much he gave back to the community. She pointed out like he lived like 3 streets away, and Eazy-E was dead at this point. But it was just a cool experience. Never contacted the guy, never contacted the lady. They just invited us into their house, and it was just cool. And I remember being in Compton thinking like, this is considered the hood. Not the hood, but it's considered, well, it is, but hoods are cool too. But it's considered like a hard part of town. But I remember thinking like, people still really keep up their lawns here. Like, they're outside like making circular bushes and stuff, circles and squares and stuff. And I'm like, what? It was crazy too, because we went out with my cousin, and at this time she was dating this dude who was like in a gang, but we didn't know. So we went out somewhere, I think, and at night, everything closes like really early in Los Angeles. So like 2:30 in the morning, there was like no one on the streets, and he's driving. My sister and I are in the back. My cousin's in the front passenger side. And these two dudes at like a stoplight, like, start throwing up gang signs. I never seen no gang shit like that. Like, you know, we only hear about what kind of gang stuff happens on the West Coast, on the East Coast. Like East Coast gangs, I'm not really sure how they operate, but it's out in the West Coast. They're just out there with it. You see dudes like, and people all in red, all in blue, green, purple, and it's like you really don't wear these colors. And I was like, I thought that was an exaggeration. There was like no exaggeration. So these two dudes start throwing up sets and, you know, symbols and shit with their hands, and like starting talking crap about the women that were in the car, like I guess calling us whatever, you know, whatever people do to try to get under people's skin. And he started throwing sets up back, and then we get to like another red light after that one turns green, and they start doing the same stuff again. I'm not making this up. This is all in one trip. Keep in mind, the dude in Compton, Eazy-E's babysitter, you know what I'm saying? Like her grandson, like, and then like this situation. So we're at this second red light. There's nobody on the streets. Homeboy gets, like, he at the, when it turns green, like he like slams on the gas, pulls out in front of these other people, and slams on the brakes, and they hit the back of our car. And like, he gets out, the car is still rolling. My cousin gets into the driver's side, like from the passenger side. She just like hops over and she puts the car in park, and he just gets his ass beat so bad in the street. Like, I'd never seen a fight like that. I haven't seen very many fights, but I'd never seen a fight like that. Like, these two dudes, like, they totally, and I think there may have been a third one, but against one dude, like, it was mental, you know. So then they get back into the car and leave him bloody. And then, you know, my sister, and I never seen somebody look like that after getting beat up. He's in the passenger side at this time. We're like pulling out, and then we just hear like screeching tires, you know. And my sister, like, no, I hear screeching tires, and then I hear gunshots, and then my sister is like looking out the back window. I'm like, B, get down, you know, and I push her head down. I'm like, you don't look in the direction of gunshots. And they just light the back of the car up. They just start shooting the back of the car up, and then they just take off. And then we pull over, and Buddy is still bloody, and then we call the cops. And that was that, you know. And that's like, and there was like more stuff that happened. I forget what, I don't think, but maybe not anything more that extreme, you know, maybe one more thing, but for the privacy of the person involved, I don't think she would want me to mention too much about it, so I'm just going to leave it. But like, everything in Los Angeles just felt like extreme. And of course we went to the beach, and we went to all like the touristy places, and we just spent time like hanging out. And I just remember the feeling, just feeling so easy and mellow. And then we visited again, and then I moved there. And Los Angeles does have, and about the moving, I wound up moving there. I made the decision, hey, I'm leaving. My sister kind of was on the fence, and she didn't make a decision until the very last minute. And I was like, yo, I'm driving out there, period. I didn't want to drive by myself, but I was like, I'm making up my mind. I can't just stay here, you know, when I want to do this. Why not, you know? But my mom was selling her crib, and she dropped the price on the market because I was like, you know, you don't like it here, so why don't you just like move to Los Angeles? So she drops the market price, and she decides to move to LA. And then last minute, my sister decides to move to LA. And um, I wound up getting my car shipped out there, and then we wind up, just putting everything like on a 18-wheeler, I guess, Do you remember when Perrier switched over to including plastic bottles? Like, I really thought that it was going to be the end of Perrier. I grew up drinking Perrier. So when they started making plastic bottles, I was like, what? So it's like still strange to me, like, that Perrier even has like plastic bottles. I love Perrier though. But anyway, back to the story. So what next? So we get out there and we're living. Like, the first thing that happens is my mom and I, we fly out to go look for places to live, and that was rough. Like, just finding a place in Los Angeles that accepted dogs, like, that was just crazy. Like, they don't really accept pets much in Los Angeles. And but we finally found a place, and it was over in Culver City, and it was like in the hoodie kind of part of town, and it was just a wreck, like, not the place necessarily, like, it was a little weird, but like the situation, like, let's just say I didn't talk to my mom for like months after what she did to us out there. So I'll just leave that alone for another time maybe. But then my sister and I, we wound up having to like leave that place like very abruptly. And then that's how we found the apartment in East Los Angeles. And then my sister wound up abruptly leaving like soon after that to move back to the East Coast. So then I was in East LA by myself, and that was wild. Like, there's no central air conditioning in most places, like, and you're just there frying. That's another thing, the culture shock of Los Angeles. Like, there is no like heating and air. Like, you're straight either hot boxing it or you have to get a space heater, and it's just wild, And that was like my biggest problem. Well, I guess it's maybe a tie for, I don't know. My biggest problem was like I couldn't take the heat in my apartment. Like, I got heat stroke, and I wound up having to very abruptly move out because like it started getting warm outside, and because we moved around I think Christmas time, and then like when it started getting warm, like early the next year, I put aluminum foil on my windows and tried everything, and nothing worked, and it was like the second floor apartment. And I remember like when I first moved in, it was after my sister moved, but I was talking to my neighbors downstairs. It was like an elderly lady and her two sons, and they said that they had like another brother who was away. And I was like, oh, and away they meant like locked up. And I had a property manager named Margarita, and she had she carried a chihuahua, really cute little chihuahua. Couldn't pet it, but it was really cute. And she had teardrops on her face, and her apartment was like awesome. Dark red crushed velvet everywhere. Like, I'm talking about, she was in there for a while. And on every single one of the walls, I can't remember if it was on the ceiling, but I remember the whole place was dark. Like, there wasn't like a white wall. Like, everything was covered in velvet. And like, like those like gold, like old Byzantine art type style things, like of like religious pictures, like Byzantine meaning like 11th century, like that kind of gold. So she had like that kind of like style of like Catholic imagery all over her place. And it was just cool. So back to my neighbors, I remember they were cooking like head soup, like it was one of the son's favorite meals, and they had the whole head of a goat in this pot. The whole neighborhood was predominantly Mexican and El Salvadorian. Predominantly Mexican, this neighborhood. The next neighborhood I moved into was predominantly El Salvadorian and Mexican. But I remember this one, it was right when there were problems in Los Angeles' jails, between the gangs in the jails, like the blacks and the Latinos were having problems. So on the outside, what was happening were a lot of kids were getting shot when they wouldn't or couldn't tell what gang they were claiming. Like, you would be like, which set do you roll with? And you didn't answer. If you gave the wrong answer, like dozens of kids like got killed, you know, probably, I'm guessing around like 18. Yeah. So so in my neighborhood, like, maybe I was blending in, like I wasn't, you can kind of tell that I'm not Mexican, but you can kind of tell, like, maybe, you know, like, people speak Spanish to me all the time. So, you know, but I also think that we get along as people. So maybe, hopefully they just feel comfortable around me. They're like, oh, she looks cool. I remember recently, like, so this lady at Walmart, she was asking me like some pricing stuff in Spanish. And I'm like, but, you know, we can vibe. I get where you're coming from. So let me try to work it out, you know? So, but I remember, like, soon after, like, I first moved in, it's gonna be a long video, but I remember, like, hearing a whole bunch of squad cars, like cop cars, and I look outside, and like my city block, which is very short because this is East Los Angeles, not like downtown LA or like West LA where stuff gets more spread out. This is residential almost, you know. And there were like 8 cars outside, like from one end to the other end, and then filling everywhere in between. And then there were 2 helicopters, and the spotlights were like coming down on my house. And I'm like, what? And then I'm hearing gunshots, and I'd never seen any of this kind of stuff. Now, keep in mind, this neighborhood was completely like silent. I remember walking my dog, and there would be nobody outside. And I'm like, does anyone even live here? And then it dawned on me, like, as time went on and I started learning about gang stuff, and then I heard like the shot. I don't know, like, I called the landlord and I was like, where am I? And he's like, well, that's why it's month to month. I was like, oh my gosh, okay. But I really enjoyed living there. It's just, you know, my walls were thick and I could get into a place, you know. But like, if you look online and you look up the name of the area that I was living in, and I found out the name of the area when I was walking my dog one day, and these 2 dudes came up, and I thought they were going to steal him, and they were like, why are you here? Do you even know where you are? And I was like, no. And they told me, and then I remember, you know, my sister and I researched it, and she was like, this is where you're living. And I won't say the name, privacy, but if you look online, the thing that you see on the bottom, like on the sidewalk, like the fence on the sidewalk, you see my bedroom window, and then you see the huge mural of like the hand signs and the numbers of the gang. And I'm like, oh. And you still see that now, like, but I really enjoyed living there, you know. I don't know, it felt familiar and comfortable. It's just the edge, you know. Sometimes you just don't want to live with the edge. So after that, I moved, you know, I had to go an emergency moving and move in to an extended stay hotel. And I had to move in with a friend of mine because it was an emergency. Like, I got heat stroke really bad. I adopted a cat, and I had to give the cat back. And I had a dog, and I just couldn't. His eyes would bug out, and he would be panting all the time. And I'm like, I just can't. So then after that, I moved to MacArthur Park. And so if you look up MacArthur Park, the park has a reputation, and you know that neighborhood was a neighboring gang and the same gang living together. And that was the thing about my East LA apartment, is that there were like three major gangs in one area, and all of their borders kind of rested like where I was living. So that made things, I guess, kind of on fire, but then also kind of neutral. But long story short, MacArthur Park was cool. Like LA, okay, so this is the thing about me in Los Angeles. I always felt like this sense of excitement there. I guess at a time in my life where I was like enjoying that kind of excitement. Los Angeles feels wild. I guess that's why they call it the Wild Wild West, I guess. But everything just is magnified. Like you have all these studios. Like when I was living in Culver, like a mile away was Sony Pictures. Like Sony. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just mental, because you have Sony Pictures here, and then Culver City Studios here, Paramount, Warner Brothers, Universal. I think Disney had studios too. Warner Brothers, but then there was like another smaller studio. I think maybe Pixar. I'm not sure. But you have all these places where you have like major productions going on. Like seeing stars and all that kind of stuff, and movie stars and people who, musicians and stuff like that. That's one thing. But like you have a lot of people making, in my opinion, really cool productions, and when I was there, like I wasn't doing like fine art. My thing wasn't like to do fine art. My thing was like, well, I'm here, and I might as well concentrate on film, because as an artist, I'm like, well, sorry, my hair is like, but mm, hold on, okay, I don't, we gotta be on this side. Okay, sorry, but like, just, I don't know, like I have an appreciation for like I guess productions, like where you have like people working together on something, communities of people, and I have an appreciation that everybody has like their role, and then they're making like a final product, working towards something that like means something. Now this is minus like the things about like Hollywood and that industry that aren't so hot, like like the casting couch and like the crazy stuff that goes on in their offices, and you know what I'm saying. But it's cool to see cameras and lights, like literally cameras, like really high quality cameras, people calling out like B-roll and all these types of like set terms, and actors like and actresses doing stuff. People, the debate in Los Angeles, like whether women should be called or want to be called actresses. They prefer being called actors, and all the work that people do to like go to auditions, and the way the auditions work, and when they're cool, getting an agent, all the flashy cars, like who, not necessarily like who you may see. But that's interesting too, because in Los Angeles I was a bartender, and then I was also a valet for a high-end valet company. So I would always be at, most of the time, like we would have like house parties for people. They always were like relatively wealthy people, but a lot of times it would be at studios, movie releases, new openings of like stores in Beverly Hills, studio stuff, private parties at like people's houses, like Judge Mathis and Christina Aguilera and Gwen Stefani and stuff like that. And bartending, I remember like working at the Polaroid house, and it was when I forget what her name is, but she was famous, and she was having like a drinking issue at the time, Lindsay Lohan. And I remember like being her bartender, and it was cool, and there was all kinds of people. And I remember working the same house for the valet company and seeing the lady who floated in the Matrix, Trinity, like, and all kinds of people like all the time. So when you see them, it's kind of like, it's cool because it just brings people like together, and it's just cool. It makes you see like, they're like, of course, they're real people, but it's cool. You guys are at like the same event. I'm eating the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? The people feed the valets very well. I'm drinking at the Polaroid house. I must have had like 8 bottles of champagne taken home with me that night. Like, seriously, they're just giving the bartenders all these bottles of champagne. I had champagne to drink for like weeks, maybe a couple of weeks. And that's just cool because like, I am not an actor. I tried acting when I was there, but mainly I was trying to shoot documentary. Like, I wanted to like use music and lighting and cameras, like all these little tools. Like right now, like my tools are digital. I film on my webcam, but then I'm using like my computer for like digital work, and then I have like my dip pens for like illustration. Like, it's the same thing to me. Like, using what I have and putting together and editing and what editing software. And I think that's all really fun. So, and acting, I tried. I felt like it would be fun, to get to this point where I could use myself as a tool. Like when I was first graduated, I was modeling a lot, but that wasn't my thing. I didn't like modeling. Like I liked modeling to a degree because I liked the attention of like, I like getting makeup put on me, but I don't like the community makeup, like makeup artists. And another thing I had serious problems with was you're not going to do anything to my hair. And as a model, you have to be like open to people doing whatever. Well, let's not go there. I never had any shady stuff happen with modeling or acting. Thank God, but I wasn't sticking around to find out. Like, I wasn't that diehard. And I left the modeling industry when it got to that point. It's like I wasn't so deep. Like I had some cool campaigns and stuff, but then it just got to being this thing where like you had to like be okay with showing skin, And over the years, I've noticed that it's almost impossible to see a model that hasn't, or performer or anybody, especially female, that hasn't gotten put into this sexual kind of situation, like with having to show skin or cleavage or whatever. Bikinis are a big, like, oh well, it's swimwear. It's like, no, it's like underwear, and so I left then. But when it came to like acting, I felt like, I would have fun getting into like being this other character, like and really, being able to like be my own tool. But then it just got to being a lot of rigmarole, like doing extra work. I did a lot of extra work too. So I worked, that's how I saw a lot of sets. I wasn't like, oh, here comes JT, let her through the gates. Oh, give her the all access pass. Like, no, I'm out there getting paid $8 an hour for 8 hours. 64 a day is what they call it. 64 for 8. When you call in on the line to get booked, 64 for 8. And if you get overtime, you're there for like 14, 15 hours, but then you start getting more. But that's what it was. But I saw it as an opportunity just to work on all these different sets. And it was real cool because then you see like actors and how it is for actors who are acting on set, actors, directors, ADs, assistant directors, all that kind of stuff, first AD, second AD. And Make sure my Xbox doesn't shut down. But yeah, so but that's how I really like. I wanted to learn about movies, just because I think that I always thought movies were interesting. Like growing up, I watched Goonies every day for almost an entire year, like every single day. Like every day, I watched the same movie when I was like 10. Even now, I've watched Game of Thrones like through 7 times, maybe more. And that's not even counting my favorite episodes. Season 6, episode 10. I've been watching that one for like a week. And I've been listening to the soundtrack of the intro scene for a week. So I've been liking like movies and stuff like that for like a while, like Neverending Story and Goonies. I never saw E.T. I never saw movies because there was a point in my life where I never watched any. And then I got to a point where it was like, okay, wow. And then that's when gangsta rap came through shortly after. So you get to Los Angeles and I just like being on sets. I felt like I could learn a lot. And then I was like trying to get my SAG card, the Screen Actors Guild, and you have to do it certain ways, and that's when stuff started getting really frustrating. Like you have to rely on somebody who's giving out the vouchers at the end of a shoot. Basically what you have, like what you fill out, so it goes back to your agency. And this agency is called Central Cast. Like the biggest one is called Central Casting. And that's just how you get your paycheck, And so, but if you're doing like just non-union work, then you're getting paid at $8. If you get paid union, you're like at 13 or 14, but you need 3 union vouchers in order to be able to sign up to join the union. And that's the loophole. Like union vouchers go to union people. And so what they do is they tell you to like ask ADs at the end of a set, get on the set of like big movies like Spider-Man or like big productions. Like you have movies and they're cool and they may have some like relatively big names, and then you have movies that are like the mega movies, like when a new Spider-Man is being filmed. There was one called like The Bucket List with like Jack Nicholson and Morgan Freeman. That wasn't like a big massive movie, but you have those names like Alex Trebek. Like I was on the scene when they were doing Jeopardy. Like I guess their bucket list thing was to be on Jeopardy, and it was a cool set to be on because I was like an audience member of Jeopardy. So I'm on these sets like, okay, well maybe they'll have extra vouchers, and then you have to like rely on like some union person not showing up, which is a huge no-no, but you have to kind of look at it like that. And then it could go into like whatever else, other shady things, like you sleep with some AD. Like I never even thought about that until years later, like that being a way that people may have approached this. I still couldn't even imagine that, like like but I mean, after watching all these things like on YouTube and researching, like not necessarily researching, but you just see like there's a lot of fucking that goes on in Los Angeles, like for Hollywood stuff, and it's just like it's to that degree. Like I only got 1 union voucher, and I forget like what it was for, but I enjoyed being on the sets. But then after a while you get burnt out, and Los Angeles is hard. That's the thing. Like Los Angeles is like constant work. Like to go to the supermarket, it's work. If you have a car, it's work. Like I remember like losing my car in Los Angeles and then being on foot, like going to the supermarket, but it would be an adventure. So it's but it's an adventure. It's kind of like Skyrim. Like if I'm going to go through a storyline and it's a big part of the story, it's going to be kind of hard. It's going to get kind of cumbersome and tedious, but ultimately it's going to be fun and add to the overall story. And that's how Los Angeles is all the time. But the thing is that starts getting to you is like sometimes the mentality of the people kind of get to you. Like I'm gonna be a star. I was born to be a star, and this and that, and it's always like acting, acting, acting. Oh, I'm this. I'm a musician. I'm a model. You have constant people who are coming in off the plane, and they have like stars in their eyes, and it's partly really cool, and then partly very superficial. And then you have like the locals, which are real cool, but you have to kind of like go off the beaten path. And sometimes like Los Angeles people can get a little bit too like new agey. Like I'm all new age and all that kind of stuff. I'm into the metaphysical. That's cool. But sometimes they go out like too far out there, and it's just like you guys are like a bunch of balloons, man, just floating in the air, and it's just like you just want to tie like a little mini brick to like their balloon so they just get grounded, and sometimes it's a little too like airy. And sometimes there's a little bit too much attention to like stars and quote unquote stars and all this kind of stuff. And I've never been one to be starstruck at all. I think it's cool like to be famous. Well, not even cool. Like, I mean, it's cool when you see like, I don't know, like it's interesting. It's interesting to see somebody you've seen only on TV. But that's about as far as it goes. Because I've seen myself on TV. Maybe that's it. That might be it. It's like I got used to my sister with the camera, like early, and then seeing myself on TV, even really low budget home video. So I think I got that kind of sense early. And then when I was living, in my city, like after graduation, like I did work on a lot of cool productions, where famous people were around. And I think, just seeing that they're the same, like if you know what goes into a production, you see that these people are just working and their final product is just put onto a screen. Now there are some really good actors who give really good performances. Like I remember I was on the set of like I think Law and Order, and Dennis Hopper, he's an older gentleman who's been acting for a long time, and I remember he gave a really good performance like on a TV show. And I remember being on this set and he was just popping off on people, and he was still in character and just rage, and I was just like, wow, it's crazy. But he gave a really good performance, but then they had to redo it and he got really pissed, and then they had to like stop the production. Like stuff like that is interesting. But I know there's a lot of hair and makeup and teams of people that go into these things. And that's what it's like, a team effort, And the money, like it's never been like my thing. Like I like money. I like drinking Perrier. I like having fried chicken, and I like video games and trying new makeup and traveling. I get it. But like stocks would be cool and all that kind of stuff, but after a certain point it's like basically like how somebody uses their money and how they choose not to flaunt it is attractive, or something that could be deemed as attractive. But it being like an integral point of like, you have money, I think you're sexy, that's not my deal. So when it came to being like in Hollywood, like I know that a lot of stuff is rented. I know that a lot of people are in debt, and that's all cool. Like it's no insult to them. Like I just understand that there's way more going on when it comes to stuff. So, money in Hollywood, like I did always see that making your own production and doing things kind of like your way is the way to like not be financially chasing your tail all the time. Like if I went to go choose to work on a set, like eventually I would have to make my own ish in order to get anywhere. Because on a set, like, you have the actors and you have the director, and pretty much anybody else is like second fiddle, and you're not going to get paid as much, and then you have the good old boys club and So I don't know. Basically, the money in Hollywood is another annoying thing, because a lot of stuff gets associated with money, and because you have like the broke actor, you have the broke artist syndrome, and I think people get tired of that there, and then it gets to this point where it becomes about money, and I get it too. Like, don't get me wrong. So me saying this right now, I'm like, I gotta catch myself even now. But like living in the country, I like it more. I like where I am with things now. I wouldn't mind living in a city, but I also wouldn't mind living in the country. I could find joy in both places very easily. Like, very easily. I grew up in a forest. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm very cool with nature, and I like the slower pace. I like having space, not being interfered with, not having to see the energy of people unless like I choose to. You know what I'm saying? Like, not having to put up with too much stuff. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I can have like a lower tolerance level in the country, you know? Like, I don't really have to worry about hearing people or seeing people that I don't want to hear or see. You know, like even those bus rides to the supermarket in Los Angeles, like, you would have to deal with just craziness on the bus all the time. And that's like not even comfortable, because you're on this bus, like in this enclosed small area, and you have somebody who's like on the last leg of their mental race all the time. Like, there's been buses that you have to like, they had to pull over and get the person taken off. Like, I've been on those LA buses plenty of times. Like, you know, you're in the country, I can have access to the stuff I want to have access to. Like, I just have an easy way of living where I can concentrate on my art, concentrate, you know, in general, and be like focus on different things. Like, your focus kind of gets spread out in city places, and that's cool. You know, it's like, I'm not anti, but I think I have a special appreciation for living in more rural areas. So I would totally not mind living always in a rural area. I'd like to visit cities sometimes, change a pace, get like a dose of like the wildness, and you know, that'd be cool. That'd be like, you know, take a train into town and stay like a day or two, or if it's close enough, like a day, you know. That sounds good to me. So, and I like little special things that are in country areas, you know, like privacy, but then also like the special kind of foods and cleaner atmosphere. It's another thing that I really appreciate. I really appreciate just not having to deal with too many energies that I don't want to deal with. You know, I remember when I was living in MacArthur Park, it would be cool. But then, you know, like I told you, like, you're hot boxing, like there's no AC, so my windows would be open and I would hear Mexican music playing all the time. And now I'd love to hear it, but when I was there and I would hear it, different apartments, because the place I was living, it was 2 buildings that were like 8 or 9 floors each, and they were really side by side, to a point like, I wouldn't say you could touch the other building from your window, but like the gap between them was about 10 feet. So you'd have all these people with their windows open and a lot of Mexican music, like, I don't know what to call it, and babies crying all the time. And it would drive me nuts. When I moved from that place to further, like, near the beach, like, not near the beach, but like I was like in what you could call like Little Israel, the two main kosher markets, halal and kosher. I think kosher, like one's like Persian kosher and the other one is like Israeli kosher. You would have everybody in Los Angeles coming to these two markets, and I would hear nonstop beeping all the time because the roads were one way, the parking lots were tiny. People would come in their like huge Mercedes Benzes, and the lots would get filled, and you would have lots and lots of honking all the time. And that got me to a point where I couldn't even appreciate the beauty of like the area that I was staying in. It was horrible. And that kind of stuff, just even remembering it now, I haven't even thought about these thoughts in so long. Like, it makes me appreciative of stuff here now. Like my neighbors here, they're about as lively as any that I've really had. They have people over, and I almost appreciate when they have people over. I hear like, some people hanging out, and it's like, oh, okay, it sounds like they're having a good time. Then their party stops, and then it goes back to being like quiet. I appreciate that very much. Like, I don't really have to see many people. When I do, it feels like an event, and so I appreciate those things very much. So no problem living in the country for me. Internet, some art stuff, some games, some food, and that is pretty much all I need. And that's what I'm going to go back to now. It's about that time. Let me see what time we're at. All right. So, it's about that time for me to go and do these things. So that was my Christmas time situation. And, yeah, fun times though. But I don't, the work in Los Angeles, I had to say, like, I don't miss Los Angeles. Like I did, like when I first left, it was like disappointing. Like, what can compare? That's the only city. And then as time went on, I was like, dude, I'm so glad I don't live there anymore. Like, I just don't feel like dealing with it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't feel like dealing with any of that. It's just, I want to be around good, positive energy. And there's a lot of stuff in Los Angeles that's not positive. I think they have like the highest necrophilia, like when people like steal dead bodies to sleep with them. Like they have like the highest rate of like they just go out of the just out there with stuff. And I don't know, sometimes you just don't want to just leave me alone. Not alone, but just positive energy, please. So on that note, I will see you soon and talk to you later. Have a very awesome Christmas. It's Christmas, so I'm going to have a good time, and it's going to be cool, and yeah, bye.